Welcome to What Grows. It's a podcast where we play with the connection between who we are and how we grow. I'm your host, Noella Mashi. Sarah, you have a gift for helping people birth ideas. And I know your work firsthand because you recently led me through a visioning exercise that completely surprised me. We were talking about starting my business, and you helped me surface knowledge that I didn't even know I had. And your own story of finding your passion is lovely. You write that you spent so long envying the piano prodigies and the born entrepreneurs, wanting your passion to be obvious and clear. But then one night in college, after sharing these feelings with your roommate, you woke up to find a note tucked into your jacket pocket that simply said, "Your passion is people." Talk about a friend who really sees you.
She's a wonderful friend.
I'm excited to dive into how you help people connect with ideas and maybe even explore what happens when our passions aren't as obvious as we think they should be. Could you take me back to that morning when you found your roommate's note? What did it feel like to read? Was it an instant, "Oh, yeah, that's true"? Or did it take kind of more of a slow recognition, more time?
It was such a beautiful, to your point, feeling of being like truly, truly seen, and a beautiful start to the rest of the day. And still, quite honestly, a little bit of that frustration because it's still not a clear, like, go do this thing. There's still a lot of application around that. And there's freedom in that. And there's some frustration in, like, oh, I wanted clarity so badly at that time and at different points in my life. So it was a beautiful message and not quite the clarity that I was hoping for or expecting. And I think that's a theme of my life too.
Yeah, I mean, it does take time. And I think we're really good at doing things for others that it's difficult to sometimes do for ourselves. Is something I've been reflecting on lately. I I had a conversation with someone who does strategy, especially for kind of organizations and how they like how people work together. And she just was also saying, like, I can do this for others, but for my own organization, it's like a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
Um, when you're working with someone like you did with me, what are you actually listening for? What signals tell you that someone has knowledge that they don't know they have?
It's what a great question. It's helpful to be like this on Zoom where I can see you because I can watch a person's body language is helpful a lot of times. So there were times where I'll see a client just sort of smile, or I'll see them relax a little bit. Or on the flip side, I'll see them get a little emotional and just gently ask if they're open to sharing a little bit more about where that emotion might be coming from. So it's kind of a blend of listening to what their words are, but also just noticing the somatics of what their body might be communicating through them as well. There's this beautiful phrase we learned in my coach training from Martha Beck. She taught us how to be, she says, the light the window and not the light. I do always mix them up. But to just be the window and to let light shine in. Sometimes the next question is a lot of times the next question just sort of comes to me and it seems out of the blue, but also very clear in that moment. I think it's a real sense of presence for both of us, the client and myself, to allow that light to come in.
I want to know what that looks like for you and your organization, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to to ask that. One warm-up question I ask for all of the episodes is, if you could give your life a title like it was a book, what would that title be?
Ooh. Um, Maybe we're like manifesting some future book that I'm maybe gonna write someday. This is fun. Um, the first thing that comes to mind is um, a big life, and it's a little bit a play on this book that I read and a play that I saw called A Little Life. Are you familiar with that book?
Oh, yes. I
Uh,
read the book. Yeah.
Okay, okay. We might have to talk about the book more offline at some point. But I had an opportunity to go to London and see the performance of it back in 2023. They did it on stage. And that was a solo trip that I took. And it was sort of a big idea that I had part of a bigger idea that I'd like to move to London someday. So that trip was like a solo trip to go see how do I do on my own in a new country. Not a new country, but a different country. I'd been there before. And go experience like art and eat by myself in restaurants and just really see what it's like to be on my own in that kind of experience. And a theme, if I look back at my journal through that trip, a lot of it I was writing about like I want a big life. I want unique experiences and I want options and I want to be able to dream freely and to feel free to go actually chase those dreams and do those things and have big ideas and maybe make an impact or inspire others to do the same along the way. So I think it would be the title would be like A Big Life, sort of a play on that story
I love
or
that.
that experience. Yeah. Just to give credit where credit's due, I think it's Hanya Yanagihara, but I could be mispronouncing it as well if anyone's
Oh,
interested. Yeah.
yes, yes. Thank you. And it really is, I mean, what gets me, just grips me about that book is there's so much, I mean, sadness, cruelty, but then there's these moments of kindness and friendship and connection that make you keep hoping and keep wanting more for this main character. In a way, yeah, the hope and the connection and the kindness is what makes like the brutality even harder to bear
Yeah.
because you see kind of what joy this life could possibly have, but also so much that this main character needs to kind of carry, or maybe doesn't need to, but is carrying because of what happened during their childhood and how it shapes the rest of their lives. And I wonder how that ties into this process. And I don't know if you use the phrase birthing ideas. Do you use that phrase, or what's a better phrase to use?
That's a fine phrase. Sometimes I like to joke about being a midwife of ideas.
Love it. Okay, yeah. So I'll keep with that one. And just you recommended a book by Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic, that I read and I loved. And one of her thoughts is that ideas already exist and they're waiting for a human to kind of grow with, to connect with, and to grow with. And I wonder, when I think about the evolution or the journey of an idea meeting its human, where does the idea first realize that this is the human for me? And so let's kind of make this more concrete. With your coaching practice with Anomaly, where were you when that idea first kind of found you? Were you a child? Was it more recent?
Oh gosh. Great, a phenomenal book, by the way. Big Magic, really, really wonderful book. Um, and it's fun. I don't know. I can't speak. If we're already personifying the idea, I can't speak to when they know a person's right for them. But I think it's our job to be open and receptive to all kinds of ideas, and then to know and listen to how we respond to them, to know whether or not one's right for us. And Anomaly has been like in such an evolution. Back when I was still working at my previous company, we would do kind of quarterly leadership development reviews, and we were asked to come prepared with like our vision personally and professionally, um, for the next 5 years or whatever that might look like. And it was at a time in my life where my vision had shifted quite a bit. And so I really was open and receptive to new ways of what that might look like, and sort of going back to some old dreams that I had from childhood. Like I've always wanted to live in the UK. I don't know why I'm embarrassed to say that or like feel like that's weird, but it's always been there. Um, and so I put that in this vision statement, but I worked at a financial planning company, and with certain FINRA rules and things like that, it was difficult to live outside of the States. And there were rules around having to be in the office certain number, like percentage of the time, and different things like that. And so I wasn't sure if that was possible. And I was talking to my coach at the time about it, and she just planted this seed of, um, well, what if the way you worked looked differently? Like, what if you weren't an employee? What if you were a consultant and got to work with the company at a different capacity? And that just like kind of opened my mind up to like bigger thinking and outside of the box thinking. And I was like, yeah, what if it was like that? And had never considered myself to have the skills or the personality of an entrepreneur before. So it wasn't anything I had even like thought about as a possibility. So maybe that was the sort of first seed, um, but it certainly had its different. It certainly had its evolution.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about what living in the UK means to you, like what's associated with that vision. But first I want to acknowledge how just kind of a little bit of a paradigm shift can make so much more possible because you're still working or you were still working with the same organization, the same company, but suddenly there's just more that you can do. And I
Mhm.
think about, it's been maybe 6 months, a little bit longer since I've really started to take my consulting practice more seriously and build it into a business. And I understand what the possibilities are in the immediate term and what's valuable to me. First, doing meaningful work with people I, enjoy working with, staying on for my favorite parts of a project, which is the person has an idea and it's like, how do we build this real quick? How do we launch it? So I think it's a little bit after kind of where you come in with the birthing of the ideas, and also just getting a sense of what cultures and what kind of I guess, yeah, what kind of people I'm a fit to work with, like where are they in their stage of growth, and I'm trying to get that sense up front so that I can really choose and be intentional about, yeah, where's a good space for me to be. And so I have kind of the immediate term. This is on the day to day why this makes me happy and excited. But when I think about the vision, like 10 years, 20 years down the line, what is it that I am trying to build for myself? It's not so easy. It's still a little bit blurry in a way that, I encourage clients to really think about, yeah, what's my end game? What's your end game when you're doing this? And so, yeah, I would like to hear, yeah, what will Anomaly, your coaching practice, look like if you and Anomaly are wildly successful?
I believe that there's so much un, untapped potential and so many ideas waiting to partner with really cool people who are stuck in old stories that they're not creative or they're um, not fill in the blank enough to do this thing that they really want to do, you know, um, and partner with this idea that maybe has been sort of tugging on their heartstrings for a long time, you know. Um, and I think with the size of the problems we see in our societies and our culture and our world at large now, we need people courageous enough to dream bigger to solve those problems and courageous enough to actually like not just have those dreams but actually start taking steps and making them real. And I think that courage is built over time, and it's built in small little ideas that might seem quote unquote selfish at first. You know, like my solo trip to go see a little life in London might not really have the ripple effect, but what it's doing is it's building courage in me to dream a little bit bigger and do bigger things. And then I see that ripple effect playing out in more and more people. Um, and for me to have me and Anomaly to play a role in that, that's the bigger term vision.
I love that incremental courage.
Yeah, yeah. Well said.
Walk me through what it looks like if I am someone who maybe I've been working a 9 to 5 that I'm not super passionate about, but something's been kind of wriggling and moving inside me, and I come across you and I come across Anomaly, and I don't really know. I know I need help, but I don't really know what that help looks like.
Yeah.
What happens next?
I think what happens next is to give that little thing that's been kind of calling to you time and space and a voice to really listen to it. I think that's the power of coaching. At least that's been in my experience, is just to have someone else there to ask the questions, and sometimes ask the questions that you wouldn't have thought to ask, and just for you to really be in the space of listening, and then um, and receiving whatever is trying to come through. You know. Um, So the first step is really to slow down, to listen, and then to allow the curiosity around what it is that's trying to come forth.
And sometimes we just need someone else to give us the permission to do that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes it's the questions that someone asks us that makes it really surface. For example, when we were working together, we had a session where you just kind of asked me to envision what is the name of my business, and what does she look like, and what is she doing, and what is she telling me. And I'm sure there's been people who, I mean, you've probably encountered sometimes resistance to this because there's like a real level of giving permission and suspending disbelief that's required to really listen.
Yeah.
What does that resistance look like? How do you get through that?
I don't know that I would have suggested that particular session if you and I hadn't had the conversation beforehand that we had, and I could sense in you a sort of like openness to, I don't know if I want to call it a more spiritual side or a like a little bit of sometimes I think of it as like a little bit of woo, but I like a little bit of woo in
Me too.
life. So I had a sense that maybe you would be open to that. I think others, there's just like other ways we can play with metaphor that doesn't feel quite as like, that's maybe like meets them where they are a little bit more. So curiosity comes in many, many forms, and the session that we had was just one that really impacted me, and then as we were talking about sort of my experience doing it with my coach, that you seemed curious about. So I do really try to meet people where they are, and there's a number of different tools we can use to tap into, like, someone's curiosity and some of those answers within them.
Right. And your what I perceive as your kind of gift or skill is knowing which tool to use when, just like really listening for what the person needs and meeting them where they are. And I sometimes feel that way about languaging, even with, so I kind of have positioned myself as a strategy consultant specifically for kind of growth. But that sometimes looks like coaching. That sometimes looks like sitting down
Absolutely.
and let's have a coffee and talk about spaghetti shaped problems. What's keeping you up at night? And then sometimes that looks like a very specific kind of proposal and work plan and KPIs and whatever it is. And that sometimes it gets to this challenge that I've been having. That sometimes makes it difficult for me to communicate very clearly to the whole spectrum of clients that I want to attract what it is that I do, because
Yeah.
the language really influences whether they think it's a fit, even though at the core of it, it's the same work. Have you had that?
I mean, I think I'm in that with you a little bit right now. I've been working with a really wonderful, very helpful business coach around some of those very things. I came to her early and was so frustrated that I felt like I had to pick a niche and I had to pick a way to talk about that niche. And she's like, you don't have to pick, actually. It can all be there. And the collective is what makes you unique. And that's what makes you different. You do have to communicate about it in a cohesive way. So it's not that I had to pick and choose, I just had to learn how to talk about it cohesively. And so, because I used to struggle with even just the title life coach, I felt like that
Mm.
had a specific connotation in people's mind, or maybe it just had it in my mind. But I also wasn't really a career coach, not at least not in the way people think about that either. And so where ideas came in and idea coaching and playing with that title a little bit, I felt like I could blend the two a little bit more, you know? Um, but even that, as I work with this coach, it's really just talking about and being really upfront and open about the fact that I blend the two and talking about the blend of the two more broadly and not trying to find one word or one way to say that, but just talking about it more openly. I don't know if that's helpful, but it's been helpful for me.
That is super helpful, and I feel inspired by that connection between life and career, because don't we all have that? You
Yes.
know, we all need to have kind of all facets of ourselves addressed if we're to feel whole. And, you
Yeah.
know, and I think about a friend recently asked me, like, where do I see myself in like 10, 15 years? And for some reason, I saw myself on a farm with a couple
Amazing.
of, yeah. And I had a couple of kids. I was writing fiction, but I was also doing the strategy consulting, and I got to
Yes.
travel and support people who are doing impactful work that was like really interesting and also challenging. So it was just kind of a blend of everything. And so when I think about idea coaching, and I'm making this up, but I do kind of think about, yeah, how does that vision of also having a family, also kind of running a
Yes.
farm and doing this consulting work and a portfolio career, as some people like to call it, like how does that kind of fit into a cohesive plan, you know?
Right. Or a cohesive like title of who I am and who I serve, right? And so yeah, talking more openly about the blend of those things allows for beautiful conversations like this for people to say, actually, I actually have ideas in all these different areas of my life. And I'm most interested in like how do I bring all of them together to one cohesive life, you know? I had a there's an exercise we did or learned about in training called the ideal day. Um, and it's sort of projecting, 5 or 10 years into the future, one ordinary day, but in your ideal perfect life. Like every aspect of your perfect life is being fulfilled. And I did this with a client once, and she and her family lived on an orchard. And I was like, "Do you live on an orchard now?" She's like, "No, I did not see that coming." And that's not to say that's no one's holding her to that, but it was just fun to like play with. And now that idea came to her as like maybe we have a family orchard, and she still gets to decide what to do with that. But it was fun to just be open to receiving like new ideas of what that life could look like.
I love that. And I think something else, and maybe Ellen Donnelly, who you mentioned, says
Yeah.
this, but um, something else that you and I have discussed is the importance of financial freedom to really making that idea feel possible. Because sometimes when I think about following your dreams, even, it feels like that's only for a particular socioeconomic kind of demographic. But
Mhm.
that doesn't have to be true, right? So, how does financial freedom tie into still kind of having the courage to chase those ideas? And maybe that's different for different people. And so I'm wondering, have you met someone, coached someone, seen someone who has done this well or in an inspiring way?
I read a book earlier this year. I think there's a lot of emotion and stories tied up for people around money and finances and whether or not that allows them to chase their dreams or not. And I am one of those people. Like I'm still in the thick of that as well. It's honestly a big reason I'm not in London right now. Like I'm still working through some of that myself. Um, but I read a book earlier this year by Rachel Rogers called "We Should All Be Millionaires." It's great for anyone, but directed to women. She is a coach now, but was a lawyer before. So I like to joke like she makes a strong argument, but I really bought into the argument that she makes in this book. She really goes into sort of the political and cultural messages around money, especially that we hear as women, and then what to do with that, how to start shifting that, um, and really inspired me. She, to be a 7-figure income earner was not something I really like cared about. I don't care about the number or the how many decimal points or anything like that. But her book was so beautifully written that by the end I was open to it, and open to it because I knew that it gave me a sense of freedom to go dream big and have a bigger impact. But she really gives a great outline of how to get there, um, not just in strategy, but the mindset and the emotional aspects of it as well. That was a great mindset perspective shift for me with that book around
Yeah,
money. Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be looking that up because I think that's important. And so when I think about revenue streams, like let's assume that the non-negotiable is you do really want to do something that feels like it's coming from your passion, right? And passion can change over time.
Mhm.
So then maybe the question around revenue streams is how this work manifests, whether it's like in a, I don't know, for example, for coaching or consulting, there's like B2C opportunities to work with individuals, there's B2B opportunities to work with organizations. There's different ways that you can be doing that. And I think it's really important to find the ways that feel authentic to you, as well as the ways that will lead to financial freedom. And I'm on that journey myself now. And I think about um, marketing and I think about sales. And I don't think that they have to be icky if they're done with a view to adding value, if they're done authentically. And I, one to many is not my strong suit. So I like to do one to one conversations like this. And maybe this helps ideas emerge, but also helps to share, just build some conversation around like, what does uh, getting to know and understand people deeply so that you can support their growth and their organization's growth. What could that potentially look like? What are you finding is an authentic way for you to like connect with potential clients these days?
I'm with you on the I prefer one to one over the one to many. Um, to bring up Ellen again, she's really been helpful in like one to one is great. Can we do a blend of both? And so finding that blend too has been really freeing and liberating as an opportunity to even just establish myself as someone with experience and authority in this particular space around how ideas can create personal and societal evolution, if we let them, if we lean into them, if we're open to receiving them, all these sorts of things. So it's funny because the way she and I got introduced was a connection from a mutual friend who said, hey, who I was sharing a little bit about my work and some of my struggles, and she said, "Hey, are you familiar with Ellen Donnelly?" And I said, "I'm not." And then I just went and was able to kind of just like binge her work online a little bit. I read a lot on her Substack, read through her website. And so to have all of that content there, to me, from Anomaly's lens, like that feels like one to many. It's sort of like sometimes I feel like I'm putting stuff out into a void when I'm like posting things online. Um, and yet I'm so glad she had done that, past Ellen had done that, so that I could go and binge all this content and really get a sense of like, who is this person, and is her expertise something that I need at this point in my own business evolution. And it was. We had a discovery call, and I think I said yes the next day. Like it was a very fast kind of sales process, but it was a mix of like, I'm so glad she had that content out there, which feels like one to many. And we had a really great discovery call, which was one to one. So I really do think it is a blend of both. And I'm trying to work more of that into my business as well.
What is your intention when you share?
Um, the intention is evolving as well. I feel like this whole that's been a theme of this whole conversation. Like, yep, I'm in the middle of learning that.
Aren't we all?
Um,
Yeah.
and and so the newsletter also evolving. But if I could just give an example of a future idea that I have that is in the works, I would also like to start a podcast, specifically celebrating how our ideas evolve us as people, how they are
Mhm.
catalysts for personal development as much as like idea development, so to speak. It's not just the outcome of the thing, it is how we grow as people. Um, so I have a couple potential guests that I've talked to come on and talk about like how reconnecting to creativity has influenced them, coming out of a corporate space. I have a friend who's a business owner who the startup process asked a lot from her. And so, what does happen when our ideas take maybe more than we're willing to give? What happens when we are met with countercultural ideas? And how do we stand behind those and stay in our integrity while we do so? Um, yeah, all those kinds of things, and really celebrate sort of the heroine's journey, the internal journey of those experiences.
Yes. Oh, I would listen to that. I
Yeah,
love
thank
it.
you. Stay tuned. So I
Yeah.
would love my content to be more around that, of really like kind of how our ideas shape us, and then how, since we're sort of microcosms of the macro, how then as more of us are shaped by our ideas and build those incremental courage, as we talked about earlier, how that ends up shaping a society at a larger scale.
There's certain conversations where I feel like there we are bigger than kind of our day-to-day lives. Like we are connected in some way. We are agents of like a much bigger movement. And I can't define any of that, but there's like this energy for self-knowledge, kind of conscious, I don't know if the word is evolution, but like conscious growth that
Mm-hmm.
then is kind of infectious in the best possible way. It's like, I'm seeing you as Sarah doing this and asking these questions. Therefore, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can ask these questions. And in a way that makes even more room for others, in a way that makes room for honest stories, like not just success stories, but all of it, the messy, beautiful middle. Um, and yeah, and so that, yeah, that energizes me. And I want to ask you about how your idea evolved you. When I think about the note in your pocket where this all started, your passion is people. How has that looked over the years? How has that changed over the years?
um, well, at the time when that note was put in my pocket, I was studying at university and college, studying psychology. I was studying people to a degree, and I still really love that, and ended up working part time at this financial planning company while I was still in school. And then they offered me a full time job after college, but felt really supported in sort of my unique contribution. It didn't feel like I just was taking any old job and here's the job description and you will fill this. Like it really felt like a collaboration where, yes, I had responsibilities, but they were open to creating a role that also fit my strengths and the different things that I could bring to the table, even at that young age, which was really cool. So I talked a lot about, motivation and behavioral change and things like that that I was studying and bringing that into a sales space. They really saw value in that. I think I was there for 9 years, which is a long time to be at one company. And I do think I lost some of those parts that felt like me. Um, to a degree. I think there was always a longing for some to be in more creative spaces as well. So Anomaly like allows me to bring in more of those parts of myself that sort of got lost in the shuffle or in the paying the bills and the doing sort of the steps that you're supposed to do outside of college.
Were you a salesperson?
I was not. I was coaching and working with and kind of the training and development side of those who were in the sales role.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was unique about that experience is a lot of those sales reps, financial advisors coming in, didn't necessarily have a financial services background. So they're stepping into, they were well trained, don't get me wrong, and they had a ton of support, but they're stepping into commission based role in an industry that they're not familiar with, taking a huge risk for their family and themselves. There's a lot of emotion that goes into that experience. And they had a lot of support and they had a structure to follow that was proven to work and all these things. But the actual doing of that is still difficult. There were times where they would come to my office and just say like, this is hard, I'm uncomfortable, I know what I have to do, but for some reason I'm not doing it. And there's emotion and there's stories and there's thoughts behind there that are keeping them from asking for referrals or seeing the value in the work that they're doing or things like that, right? So I think it's more of the psychology uh, of the advisor doing their work than necessarily in the sales process itself, although it certainly applies there as well.
Mm. So if someone walked into your office and said, I just feel uncomfortable asking for what I need or doing this
Yeah,
job, like what would you say to them?
I'd probably just first like validate, like, yeah, it is uncomfortable. This is new. This is different, of course. um, and then a lot of times I don't know if it was always articulated as discomfort. It would just be like, I don't want to, or this is hard, or something like that. So a lot of times I'd ask for like additional adjectives for what they were feeling. There's a lot of great work that Dr. Susan David does around emotional agility. And she suggests that our emotions are data, not directives. So, in my mind, if we can get more specific about the data, more nuanced in our emotional vocabulary, then the more helpful that information is. And now we're sort of already stepped out of the feeling of that emotion, and now we're sort of observers of the emotion, right? So, okay, if I just say I'm mad, but really I'm frustrated, that's different than saying I'm mad and feeling betrayed.
Hmm.
And so, like, now I have better information about what it is I'm really feeling and how I want to act in response to that.
I think this also speaks to the knowledge comes from inside the person, and you're
Mhm.
helping them surface what already exists. And so that definitely, I can see that movement then towards being an ideas coach. What skills would you say are important, essential to being an ideas coach?
Ooh. Um, Meeting people where they are, um, and being able to sort of read and interpret or intuit where they are. I think feedback I've heard from a handful of clients is that I I know when to push and I know when not to. Um, and I know when to challenge and I know when to validate, and so I think the skill of just being able to read that, and that comes with relationship, that comes with trust. Um, what other skills? Curiosity, openness, practicing these things in my own life is sort of like a version of going first. I think creativity is an underdeveloped skill, in a lot of people, and I think is a really handy one in an ideas coach, just to be able to play with metaphors and think in a more outside of the box creative way. Um, yeah, those are a couple that come to mind. Patience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about birthing ideas, and as we get towards the end of our conversation, saying goodbye to ideas is something I'd love to touch on.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it's the death of ideas. That sounds dramatic, but when it's time for an idea and its person to part, and sometimes it feels unfinished. You mentioned that you were going to talk with a friend who really it was challenging to push the idea into reality. How do you know when it's time to say goodbye to an idea? And how do you say goodbye to it well?
What a beautiful question. And I think the answer is just your ability to listen and to listen to when it's done. And that's hard. It's hard to do. Even if you hear it, it's hard to accept. It's easy to be like, I didn't, what? I don't know. Selective hearing a little bit. Um, there's definitely been ideas I've held on to for longer than needed. Um, and just trusting. And so if you're hearing that, maybe it's an opportunity or an invitation also to listen to what else is there. Is there something else that's asking to come forth? It's tricky because I also know there's like a lot of people who hop from one to the other, and jump around a lot. And maybe that's okay too. If there's grief in letting go of one, um, maybe it's helpful to think about like releasing it to find its right person. That's just like not for you. It's funny. I was listening to the Wicked soundtrack on my drive yesterday, and there's a part in Defying Gravity where Glinda's like, you could still have this dream, you could still be with the wizard, you could still do this thing that you've been working really hard to do. And Elphaba's just so clear, like, something's changed, like I can't have that anymore. And yes, there's grief in that, and yes, there's a lot of liberation on the other side, of like, well, maybe now I can go defy gravity the way that's meant for me.
Hmm. What do you think of this distinction? Because I'm not sure. I try to separate out when I'm running away from something
Mm.
versus when I'm running towards something else. Is there kind of a better way to release ideas, running away versus running towards? Is it okay to release an idea without having a back something else that you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then you're just in a really uncomfortable limbo period, and that's uncomfortable, but it's more than okay to be there. You're just waiting to hear the right thing. And maybe you're playing with, I don't mean to put them on like a size comparison, but maybe you're playing with like smaller ideas or just reconnecting to creativity. Maybe there's some healing that needs to do. um, yeah, that limbo period's uncomfortable, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I actually think it's a really beautiful sort of like liminal space where it's not quite that, but I also don't really know where I am over here either, right? It's like a threshold. I don't think it's as black as white as maybe saying I'm running away from or running towards.
Mm, yeah. I guess my last question, and this is really as a way to understand what makes you excited about the work that you do and about the future, whatever time frame you put on it. What does moving to the UK mean to you?
Ah, yes, back to that one. um, It's funny because, like, in high school, a good friend of mine and I would, like we listened to, like, British pop music. We didn't really listen to American pop music, and we'd, like, illegally download, like, British, teen shows. Like, we'd watch Skins and things, like, we weren't really
Oh, I
interested
remember that.
in, like, American, pop culture. We were, like, very curious about British pop culture. And I had an opportunity to study abroad while I was in college, and then that was the first time I actually was physically there in the country, and there was something about it that just felt right, just felt like home. I just felt very comfortable there. Um, it's like such a nerdy thing, but I love a train. I love taking a train somewhere. Um, that ideal day exercise I mentioned earlier with the client that didn't know she wanted to have an orchard. I had the opportunity of being on the client side of that experience, and my ideal day was like getting up in a beautiful townhouse in London and taking the train and having like a coffee and croissant. I think because I drive a lot too, there's something really freeing about being able to travel without the responsibility of being the driver. And just being able to sit on the train and read a book and eat my croissant, sip my coffee, and go to work. And there's again these things that I didn't think I'd be curious about, but like the architecture is so beautiful, all the like rolling hills, and to be relatively close compared to how spread out the U.S. is to like larger bodies of water and all these national parks. And I know you can find all of these things in other places, but for me, there's something about it that I don't know that it's my forever place, but I definitely know that I want to be there for a while.
Yeah. And there's some, when you know,
I know,
you know?
exactly. Sometimes why is a helpful question, and a lot of times it's not. Um,
Right.
so it's just like, I don't actually know why. I just know that there's this like pull, and I enjoy being there and it brings me joy. And so like I'm just gonna say yes to that and not question the reason behind it.
I'm a big believer in the pull, the
Yeah.
intuition, the instinct for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much. I so enjoyed our time together. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm also always looking for guests who enjoy meaningful conversations. If that sounds like you, please send me a message and let me know what you'd like to talk about. I'll get back to you. Thanks for listening.